Well, for more on this story, I'm joined via Skype by Siphamandla Mkhwanazi. He's an FNB Senior Economist. Thank you so much for joining us, Siphamandla. So the Statistician General there explaining the technicalities, but when all is said and done, it does mean that 2.2 million people lost their jobs, meaning that they were not able to earn an income and provide for their families. And because so many millions of people were not able to look for jobs, those people too were not able to earn an income. And the bottom line is that South Africa has a serious jobs problem and a crisis, a socio-economic crisis, because there's so many millions of people who can't fend for their families.
Good evening, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. It is a crisis. The official numbers are not a true reflection of what really is happening. Under the circumstances, I think it's slightly more useful to look at the expanded definition of unemployment, which rose to around 42%, and that in any country under any circumstances is indeed a crisis. And further to that, and which is much of a risk for policy setting going ahead, it looks as though that the impact of the pandemic has been disproportionately distributed. It appears that it's workers in the lower end of an income pay that have been more severely affected, or those that are semi-skilled, if you were to put it like that. So even the shock itself is unevenly distributed, which will then require a much more proactive policy response.
Yeah. Now, of course, we know that there was an exceptional event, that is the lockdown, which created this situation, and we've had the easing of the lockdown regulations. What do you suppose Q3 will look like? I mean, it will be quite a miracle if those 2.2 million jobs that were lost in the second quarter were now gained back in the third quarter. But do you see a marked improvement in the third quarter at all?
Look, overall, even if there were to be an improvement, I think it'll be too small to make a dent on the startling numbers that we have seen. There might just be some improvement, particularly in the informal sector or the more manual forms of labor, take mining, take manufacturing. As the lockdown restrictions are eased, we know that a lot more people were able then to go back to work. But even in the greater scheme of things, I don't see it. I don't see that having much of an impact on the overall numbers that we are seeing. Instead, looking at what the expectation is on the economic outlook from now onwards, one wouldn't really assume away the possibility of unemployment actually rising further from these current levels.
Yeah, that makes sense because of the technicality. But then just in terms of it's an emergency, like you say, and we keep on hearing about a recovery plan. You know, it feels as though this situation is like somebody's either drowning or a house is on fire, but the firemen are just not coming. How urgently do we need these plans that are proposed to actually be implemented to change things around? Because, of course, many South Africans are living in dire straits, not being able to fend for their families. And, of course, this has a knock-on effect on children, families, etc.
It's a time-ticking bomb, unfortunately. These numbers suggest that it's possible that we will see a higher rate of social unrest, with social unrest for service delivery, for employment opportunities, and it's just a matter of time. I'm just looking at these numbers, so I can't stress it any further that these plans that have been tabled, we don't need new. I think we have sufficient. We just need implementation. So it's implementation from now on.
Is there also a fear, Siphamandla, as well, given the impacts of COVID, that many organizations or firms that are going to further mechanize? Because obviously COVID has taught us that in these situations where people can't go out and so on, it's better to have mechanization because the machines can carry on.
That is another big risk. If you look at the sensitivity of employment to output per sector, you will see that employment tends to react more sensitively to output in the trade sector, the the construction sector, the manufacturing sector. Now, those are sectors in the South African context that are still a little bit behind in terms of mechanization, in terms of adopting technology. Now, this crisis might just well present an opportunity for them to adopt more technology, which will then mean that in the recovery phase, we might not be able to create the employment that we have currently lost. So another risk that will require a proactive policy response.
Siphamandla, thank you so much for your time, sir. That was Siphamandla Mkhwanazi. He's a senior economist at FNB.